elected a new president. His name was Richard Nixon. And the next year he began pulling Americans out of Vietnam. In 1969, the Paris peace talks floundered along with about the only definite progress and agreement on the shape of the table. It was round. In June, President Nixon began withdrawing some of the 540,000 American troops. 3 such reductions were announced in 1969, a pullback totaling 110,000 men. And then came 1970. As the number of American troops in Indochina got smaller, their battleground got larger. John Lawrence reports.
The beginning of the end of American involvement became evident in the spring of 1970, as the gears of the Vietnam death machine were grinding more slowly. 4,000 Americans were to die that year, many more Vietnamese, and for the first time, Cambodians. 10 days after promising to withdraw another 150,000 American troops from Vietnam, President Nixon, on his own authority and without the advice or consent of Congress, decided to widen the war. It was time, he said, to take action, to clean out the communist sanctuaries in Cambodia. He gave his generals the authority to do what they wanted, to send some 31,000 American soldiers across the border in a final and fateful assault into Cambodia. Huge quantities of arms and ammunition, mostly outdated or obsolete, were captured. But the retreating North Vietnamese and Viet Cong carried the war deep into Cambodia and laid the foundation for the successful struggle of the Khmer Rouge. The intervention in Cambodia triggered sharp and strenuous protests in the United States, mainly at hundreds of college campuses, most notably at Kent State University. National Guardsmen senselessly opened fire into a crowd of demonstrators, killing 4 students and wounding 9. By 1970, it was possible to detect a difference in the attitudes of American combat soldiers. They knew that the war was winding down, that the U.S. government was pulling them out of Vietnam, and they didn't want to become the last casualties of a long and deadly war. There was still danger on every jungle patrol. One unit with a special sense for caution was Charlie Company. On April 6th, we witnessed a unique event, a temporary revolt against a commanding officer.
I'm not going to walk down there. We're going to walk down the trail. My whole squad ain't walking down there. No, that's it.
The leader of 2nd Platoon looks on helplessly as 2nd Squad turns back, away from the road. He listens sympathetically. But since 2nd Squad was on point, leading the company, the entire column is held up. Captain Rice insists on obedience.
We're going to move out on the road, period. Now, either we're going to move out and they're going to get left behind, or I'm going to take the point and they can follow me if they want to. Now, it's that simple. Now, we got a job to do, we're going to do it. It's not half as dangerous as doing some of the crap we've done out here in the boonies walking through them. At least we can see what we're doing. Now, either move out, or else I move out, and they sit on their butt right here. It's that and simple.
The young lieutenant tries to persuade Rice to change his orders, but the company commander is firm. Rice starts down the road himself, but only 5 or 6 men follow. The captain moves about 15 yards when new orders come down from the battalion commander.
Okay, we're not going to be going down the Romeo. We're going to move back down to the Whiskey on the Romeo and make a 3-shipper in a hurry.
He is told to go in the opposite direction, only 300 yards.
Get over with, we'll move out, and okay. That's right. The longer we sit here, the worse it gets.
This time, 2nd Squad moves, reluctantly.
Rivera, what do you think of this operation?
I think it's crazy. It's senseless, walking down the road. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
What's the problem?
Oh, we just don't want to work on the road. This is one of the things that I told you about when we were wondering what a new CO was going to be like. And these are the kind of things that you don't want to have him be like.
Yeah, Drayton hasn't went to the country and walked down the trail yet, and while we walked down the road. First time the way we walked down the road.
Like a duck and a shooting gallery.
Is there a rebellion today?
You might call it that. Back in the world, they called it rebellion. Here, it's just a downright refusal. We had the whole company. CO says, okay, we're going to walk the road. And the whole company says, no, negative. We heard too many companies, too many battalions want to walk the road. And that's why they aren't what they are now. They've been blown away.
Other forms of revolt were becoming more common in the American Army. At an artillery base northeast of Saigon, Gary Shepard found the soldiers getting high on marijuana, at times with the aid of a shotgun they called Ralph.
Paul, let me borrow that bowl from you. This is probably all SIDS and we're getting busted, but I don't care.
Shut down.
Firebase Aries is not unique. What's happening here is also happening to some extent at virtually every other American installation in Vietnam. Recent surveys estimate that well over 50% of the soldiers in Vietnam use marijuana.
That's my good buddy, Sam.
Gary Shepard, CBS News, in War Zone D.
Oh, that's good. I was going to say.
The GIs always knew best about the way things were going in Vietnam. They were closest to it. The combat troops, or grunts as they came to be called, had more insight into the war collectively than all the generals and politicians and much of the Saigon press corps. And what the grunts knew as early as 1965 was that the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong they were fighting were generally tougher, braver, and more determined than their South Vietnamese allies, so that all the airstrikes and combat assaults in the world would not stop them. The grunts knew. By 1970, there were serious signs of dissension within the ranks of the American Army. Thousands of soldiers were AWOL. Many were hooked on hard drugs, like heroin. Others were openly challenging their officers' orders. In extreme cases, there was fragging, deliberate attacks on unpopular commanders. It was the result of a war that had gone on too long, that was impossible to win, and in many minds should never have been started in the first place.
The year was 1971. We didn't know it at the time, but Henry Kissinger was meeting in Paris with North Vietnam's Le Duc Tho, the beginning of secret peace talks. But in Indochina, the war went on as Vietnamization was put to the test. Morton Dean reports.
From the U.S. point of view, in 1971, the war became sanitized. More and more U.S. combat troops were withdrawn. Those still there did less and less of the fighting. The most dramatic military adventure of the year was the thrust into Laos, a temporary and only marginally successful effort to disrupt traffic on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Politically, in Saigon, constitutional democracy was more a facade than a fact. Nguyen Van Thieu re-elected president, but he was alone on the ballot. Back home, the fate of the POWs had become a major issue. When we left Vietnam for good, would we leave the prisoners behind? By periodic releases of film from communist sources. This film showing U.S. pilots imprisoned in Hanoi at Christmas time. In 1971, the trial of Lieutenant William Calley focused new attention on these photographs. evidence of the massacre at My Lai. 1 year before the Cali trial, Mike Wallace had talked with one of the participants in the massacre, Paul Meadlow.
Lieutenant Kelly told me, he said, Milo, we got another job to do. And so he walked over to the people and started pushing them off and started shooting. And I...
What, pushing them off into the ravine?
Off into the ravine. It was a ditch.
No.
And so we started pushing them off. And we started shooting them. So then all together we just pushed them all off and just started using automatics on them. And then...
Again, men, women, children.
Men, women, and children.
And babies.
And babies. Right, they was begging and saying no, no, and the mother was helping their children. But they kept right on firing. Or we kept right on firing.
The intensity of the U.S. air war can best be measured by tonnage. More than 7 million tons of bombs dropped on Indochina, more than was dropped everywhere in World War II. No weapon was more feared in Indochina than the giant high-flying B-52s. Phil Jones filed this report from Utapao, the B-52 base in Thailand.
It is almost a cliche now that the air war is an impersonal war. The men who drop the bombs rarely see their targets or the results of their bombs. This is especially true of the men who fly in the B-52s. We talked with some of these crewmen as they relaxed off base just a few hours after a mission. They are professionals with no qualms about their job. They are convinced it is right and necessary.
I feel that the bombing doesn't kill any more than is necessary to accomplish a mission. Without the air war and without the bombs being dropped, the communists would probably eat us alive down there. And it's either them or us, the way I feel about it. If the war wasn't being fought here, it'd be fought somewhere else.
You really think the bombs then are keeping the communists away? It is that important?
Well, I can't say it's keeping them away. It's keeping them beat back to where they should be.
Do you think it's effective?
Of course it's effective. Or they wouldn't be doing it.